Hello everyone, welcome back, and today's we got another season preview video to discuss. Today looking at two Pacific Division teams who missed the playoffs last year, and the Calgary Flames and the Anaheim Ducks. We'll look at how they did last year, how they did in the offseason, and how they're shaping up going into this upcoming season. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Nintendo Hockey Channel. Before we get this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. We're able to help you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below and leave a comment down in the comment section below so we can discuss today's video. Now, this is going to be an interesting video here today. We're looking at the Calgary Flames and Anaheim Ducks, two teams who missed the playoffs last year, and look, they're still going to be in the midst of a rebuild entering this upcoming season. So we'll start with the Calgary Flames. This past year was not an overly bad season for them, but there was one where they did not do overly well. They finished with a record of 38-39-5 for 81 points. That was good enough for 5th in the Pacific Division, 11th in the West, and 24th in the NHL. So it was not an overly great season there for Calgary. Did do alright in the Pacific, but that's with them being tied with Seattle and them having Anaheim and San Jose way behind them. So interesting to note there. They had 253 goals for, which ended up being 20th in the NHL, so just below league average. They had 271 goals against, which was 23rd in the NHL, which was close to the bottom quarter of the league, which is interesting to note there. And if you look at their point scores from this past year, Nazem Kadri led the team with 75 points. That was a pretty good season from Nazem Kadri, really good bounce back season after a down year his first year in Calgary. Sharangovich was second on the team in points with 59, and Blake Coleman was third on the team in points with 54. So those were the three guys who led this team in points. Not too surprised there. Coleman actually had a fantastic season. Sharangovich, great first year in Calgary, and Kadri had a really good bounce back season. Those were three bright spots from last year. Those three also were the three goal scoring leaders as well. Sharangovich led the team with 31 goals. Major reason as to why he extended this offseason. Coleman had 30 goals this past year, and Kadri had 29. So they did have a couple of 30 goal scorers, 170 plus player, 160 plus player. So all in all, it was a pretty decent season for some of these players, but not an overly great year for the Calgary Flames. The rookie scoring leader for this team was Connor Zary. Zary had 14 goals, 20 assists, and 34 points. Actually looked quite good as like a solid top 9, potentially even top 6 forward. So that was a pretty good pickup there for the Flames, and as we said, they missed the playoffs, so nothing else really to talk about there. For last year, if you look at their additions and losses from this past year, if you look at their additions, they brought back Jan Kuznetsov, Adam Klapka, and Dustin Wolf, so a couple decent RFAs they wound up bringing back. In free agency, they didn't make too many additions. They added Anthony Mantha on a one-year deal, should be a solid middle six forward. They have Martin Ferk, who's been playing overseas, could be a solid depth addition, play as like a spare or potentially a fourth line forward for the Flames. They add Ryan Lomberg, who should be a solid fourth line forward there for the Flames. Add Jake Bean, a little bit of a homecoming for him. He's from Alberta, and he's going to be a solid addition there on the third or second pair for the Flames. And they add Devin Cooley, who should be a solid third stringer, potentially even starting as a second stringer with Vladar still dealing with some injuries potentially. So some interesting adds there when it comes to the free agency side of things. If we look at the losses, they lost Dylan Dubé, who was part of that 22 World Junior team, never going to be brought back. He signs over in the KHL. They also lose AJ Greer to Florida. They lose Dennis Gilbert to Buffalo, Oliver Shillington to Colorado, and Jordan Osterley to Boston. So they do lose a couple of decent players, especially defensemen in free agency, but they made some interesting moves. Made two trades this year that didn't involve pick-for-pick swaps. First, they dealt Jacob Markstrom with a cap hit of $4.125 million to the New Jersey Devils in exchange for the defenseman Kevin Bahl and a top 10 protected 2025 first-round pick. So it wasn't the return that everyone was expecting on Markstrom, but they do wind up eventually moving Markstrom, which A, is good because he didn't want to be there anymore, and B, is good because it paves the way for Dustin Wolf to be a full-time NHLer this year. So that's a pretty good move there, even if it's not the return that they wanted. They also trade Andrew Mangiapane to the Washington Capitals in exchange for the Avalanche's 2025 second rounder. So it's not an overly huge deal, but it's a pretty significant one. Mangiapane gets a first start in Washington. They get a second round pick for a pending UFA, so it was a decent move, but it does hurt their goal scoring total as Mangiapane was a goal scorer, so interesting note there. If we go to top 3 picks from this past year's draft, you have Zane Parekh, who was first round, 9th overall, a right shot defenseman, should eventually be a solid top 4, potentially even top pair right shot defenseman for the Flames. They also get Matvei Gridon, who's a right winger in the first round, 28th overall, should eventually be a solid top 9, potentially even top 6 forward. And the second round, number 41st overall, they take Andrew Basha. Basha was a left winger, looks like eventually could be a solid top 9 forward as well for the Flames. So they make some interesting draft picks, had a lot of decent draft capital this offseason, and they definitely put a lot of it to good use. So interesting note there. Two biggest questions in my opinion entering training camp is one, which players will make the D. This team's gone through major changes when it comes to defense over the past year. Zadorov was dealt last year in November. Tanev and Hanifin were both traded at the deadline, so those three are all gone. They end up acquiring Pakel on waivers. They get Joel Hanley in the Tanev deal. They get Daniel Miramanov in the Hanifin deal. They now add Jake Bean in the offseason. They add Kevin Bahl in the offseason. They lose Kylington. They lose Gilbert. They lose Osterley. So this defense has gone through major changes. So my biggest question is, who makes the defensive team? I think Weegar and Anderson are locks. I think Bean most likely will make the team as well. Besides that, who else does? Does Pakel, does Hanley, does Miromanov, does Bahl? On top of that, could the younger guy like a Zane Parekh or a Justin Poirier wind up making the team? It's going to be interesting to see, but I think who makes the D is going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. And lastly, will Zary, Pelche, or Coronado be in the top 6 this year? Last year we saw some really good flashes from Connor Zary. Could he be the team's second line center this year? I think it's possible. Pelche, Coronado didn't have an overabundance of NHL time last year, but both looked like they could eventually be solid top 6 forwards. Do they get that opportunity this year, or are they more third line forwards or potentially still playing in the AHL this year? Definitely going to be interesting to see, but in my opinion, two biggest questions for the Flames for this upcoming season is one, who makes the defensive core, and two, will Zary, Pelche, and Coronado be in the top 6 this year? So those are my big questions entering training camp. Going over to my projected lineup for this team for this upcoming season, I believe this team has a decent forward group. So at this point in time, I currently have Jonathan Huberdeau playing on line 1 with Connor Zary and Igor Sharangovich. I have Nazem Kadri centering line 2 with Andrei Kuzmenko and Matt Coronado. I have Anthony Mantha playing on line 3 with Mikael Backlund and Blake Coleman. And I have Ryan Lomberg, Martin Pospisil, and Jacob Pelche playing on line 4. On the defensive pairings, I have Weegar playing with Miromanov on the top pair. I have Bahl playing with Anderson on the second. And I have Bean playing with Pakel on the third pair. I have Dustin Wolf being the starter, Devin Cooley being the backup to start the season. I have Kevin Rooney, Walker Duehr, and Joel Hanley all being the spares. And it sounds like Vladar may be injured to start the season, so I have Vladar starting on injury reserve, and that would be a cap compliant roster for the Calgary Flames. So interesting to note there. If you look at my predictions for the Flames for this upcoming season, I don't have them doing too good. I think they're going to take another big step back this year. Now, do I think they're going to be as low as teams like the Sharks and the Hawks were last year? I don't think so. Do I think they're going to be a bottom dwelling team this year and be a top 5 team in the draft? Absolutely. I do think that's going to be a very likely possibility for the Flames here. So my prediction is I have them hitting 72 points this year. 9 points lower than last year. I don't think that's too surprising if that does happen. I could see them hitting the low 70s this year after their offseason that they had. Definitely, I think that's a sort of reasonable situation for them. I have them finishing second last in the West and one of the lowest teams in the NHL. So I don't think that's too surprising, but I think that's reasonable. 72 points and -9 than last year, I think is a reasonable thing. So I definitely have the Flames missing the playoffs, and I have them being a bottom 5 team in the NHL this year, so that's where I see the Flames at this point in time. Going over to 3 ways I can see this team improve to get better than last year. One, they need to improve their defense like we just talked about. It's gone through major changes, so if they're going to have any chance of potentially making the playoffs this year, they're going to need that defense to be a lot better than it was last year. 2, they need strong play from Dustin Wolf. Wolf last year was basically a third stringer and only got a little bit of NHL action, but with Markstrom now gone, he's going to be the starter, so can he play extremely well this upcoming season? And if he can, I think that could lead the Flames to potentially being a playoff team. And 3 is more goal scoring. This team last year was 20th in the NHL in goal scoring, not overly great offensive team. If Huberdeau can find his form, if Sharangovich can build off of last year, if Kadri can replicate his performance, if some of the younger guys can take some steps, this team might be able to be a little bit more surprising than we thought. But I think the 3 ways this team can improve to be better than last year is 1, needs better defense, 2, needs strong play from Dustin Wolf, and 3, needs a lot more scoring. So that's my opinion on how they can improve. And lastly, looking at this team, my rating for this team for this past season, they didn't make a whole bunch of moves this year. I mean, they moved Markstrom, moved Mangiapane, add some decent players and guys like Bahl, Bean, Mantha, Lomberg. So didn't make an overabundance of moves, made some decent ones. And I think they did what a lot of people were expecting them to do, and that's to gear up for the future. So in my opinion, I'm going to give them a B- rating. I don't think they did fantastic when it comes to adding a lot of big pieces of things, but I think they did really good when it comes to what they were trying to do, and that's to build for the future. So I think they did really good, and I think the B- rating is warranted for the Calgary Flames, even if they're going to be a bad team this year and miss the playoffs. Next, going over to the Anaheim Ducks. Now, when it comes to Anaheim Ducks, this team team was another team who was extremely bad last year. Last year they finished with a record of 23-50-5 for 59 points, 7th in the Pacific Division, 14th in the Western Conference, and 30th in the NHL, only ahead of the Hawks and the Sharks. So they had a really bad season this past year. They had 204 goals for, which was 30th in the NHL. They had 295 goals against, which was also 30th in the NHL. So this team was bad on all accounts. They were just a bad team in general, bad team offensively, bad team defensively. They had a really good start to the season. After that, it went completely through the floor. So bad season this past year for the Anaheim Ducks. Their point leaders, they were led by Frank Vatrano, who hit the 60-point plateau with 60 points this past year, followed by Troy Terry, who had 54 points, and then Adam Henrique, before he got traded to Edmonton, and Mason McTavish, who both have 42 points. So they definitely had a couple of decent players, but only 2 players hit 50 plus. Only one guy hit the 60-point mark, so interesting to note there. The goal scoring leaders was Frank Vatrano, who had 37 goals. He had a fantastic season this past year. Troy Terry, who had 20 goals, and Mason McTavish, who had 19 goals. So the same 2 guys who had 50 plus points this past year also had 20 plus goals, and Vatrano just had a fantastic season last year. So interesting to note there. The rookie scoring leader was Leo Carlsson, the second overall pick from 2023, went out putting up 12 goals, 17 assists, and 29 points this past year, playing sparsely, so he had a pretty good season this past year for the Ducks. But besides bright spots like Leo Carlsson making the team and then Vatrano hitting 37 goals, this team was a pretty rough team last year. If we look at their additions and losses from this past year's offseason, I feel like their additions, they brought back Isaac Lundestrom, Brett Liaison, Jackson Lacombe, and Urho Venikainen, a couple UFAs, a couple RFAs. They also, in free agency, go out and bring in Jansen Harkins and Carson Mayer, 2 decent bomb sticks additions who could be spare forwards. So interesting to note there. They also lose a couple of decent players. They lose Max Jones to the Boston Bruins, Benoit Olivier Giroux to New York Rangers, Jakob Silfverberg's lost to retirement, Ben Meyers heads to Seattle, Will Lagesson heads to Detroit, Robert Haig heads to Vegas, and Gustav Lindstrom is a UFA now. So they do lose a whole bunch of players, but these are not any significant ones. Silfverberg last year became a bomb 6 forward. Meyers, Giroux, Jones were all also bomb 6 forwards. Lagesson, Haig, and Lindstrom were at best third pair defensemen. So I don't think they really lost a whole bunch of players that were overly bad, but they also didn't add a whole bunch either. I feel like their trades, they made 2 trades this year, and they were decent trades. They traded their own 2026 4th round pick to the Seattle Kraken in exchange for defenseman Fabbri and Dumoulin. That was a decent trade there for the Ducks. And then they traded Gage Alexander to the Red Wings in exchange for Robbie Fabbri and the 2026 4th rounder of the Detroit Red Wings. So they add a solid top 9 forward, a solid second, third pair defenseman for only a low-end goaltending prospect and a 4th round pick. That's pretty good in my opinion for the Anaheim Ducks. So made pretty good trades in my opinion, but not overly significant ones. So made a couple of really good trades, but not a whole bunch of really significant trades. I feel like their top 3 picks for this past year, they had 2 first rounders, 3rd overall, 23rd overall, 3rd overall. Surprised a lot of people took Beckett Senek, right winger, 3rd overall. A lot of people thought he was going to go in the 10 to 15 range. He goes in the top 3, so that's surprising, but eventually should be a solid top 6 forward. And then at 23rd overall, they took Stian Solberg, 1st rounder, left shot defenseman. That's a decent addition. Should eventually be a solid second pair defenseman on that blue line for the Ducks, so that's a pretty good pickup there. And in the 2nd round, 35th overall, the team took center Lucas Pettersson. Pettersson, I think, eventually could have a future as like a solid 2nd or maybe even 3rd line center there for the Ducks. That's a pretty good pickup there for Anaheim. The 2 biggest questions, in my opinion, entering training camp would be, 1, will Dostal be the starter? Last year, there was sort of a tandem between Dostal and Gibson. Well, Gibson was healthy. I think Dostal's proven enough at this point to be the starter, so can Dostal be the full-time starter for this upcoming season? That's going to be interesting. And 2, will Cutter Gauthier be a top 6 forward this upcoming season? Gauthier wound up being dealt to the Anaheim Ducks last year for Jamie Drysdale. It looked like it was going to be a solid addition there for the Ducks, gone to 1 NHL game. Could he make the team as like a solid top 6 forward in a top 6 that already has guys like Troy Terry, Trevor Zegras, Mason McTavish? I think it's a possibility, so we're going to have to wait and see. But the 2 biggest questions, in my opinion, entering training camp are, will Dostal be the starter over Gibson, and can Gauthier squeeze out a top 6 role in the Anaheim Ducks organization? Those are going to be the 2 biggest questions. Going over to my current projected lineup for the Anaheim Ducks for a 24-25 season. At this current point in time, I have Cutter Gauthier starting on the top line for the Anaheim Ducks with Leo Carlsson and Troy Terry. Line 2 is Mason McTavish playing with Frank Vatrano and Alex Killorn. I have Zegras centering line 3 with Robbie Fabbri and Ryan Strome, and line 4 course, Isaac Lundestrom with Nikita Nesterenko and Ross Johnston. On the defensive end, I have Fowler playing with Mintyukov, Zellweger playing with Gudas, and Helleson playing with Fabbri and Dumoulin. I have Lucas Dostal being the starter, John Gibson being the 1B/backup, and I have Brett Liaison, Jansen Harkins, and Jackson Lacombe being the 3 spares. So that's my current projected lineup for the Anaheim Ducks, which I think is a pretty decent roster. If I look at my projected point total for the Anaheim Ducks for this upcoming season, I had them taking a little bit of a step forward. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team this year, but I think they're going to take a step in the right direction. I had them finishing 14 points higher than last year and finishing with 73 points, just ahead of the team we just talked about in Calgary for being just above them. So I do see them having a decent step forward. I just don't see how much. Like I said, they're still not an overly great team. Their defense is still quite young. Their forward group still has some hiccups in it. So I'm not going to say they're going to be a team who's going to challenge for a playoff spot. And I think this is going to be quite a decent amount out of a playoff spot. But I could see them taking a really good step forward and being a little bit closer to being a playoff team. So it'll be interesting to note there. But I have the Ducks hitting 73 points this year, 14 higher than last year, and moving up in the Pacific Division standings to only 6th lowest in the Pacific. So interesting to note there. If you look at 3 areas this team can improve in the offseason and get better for next year. 1, need better offense. Last show we just said they had a completely horrible offensive team. So they need some more better offense from this team if they're going to have any shot at making the playoffs this year. They need better special teams. Special teams was not overly great for them last year, so if they can get some more special teams play, I think that could be a really good addition there for the Ducks. And they need more defensive growth. Like we just said, they have a really young blue line, so if they're able to add some more defensive help and have that young blue line grow this upcoming season, that could be a massive step forward for the Ducks. So in my opinion, better offense, better special teams play, and more growth from their defense could be major reasons to see this Ducks team get back into the playoffs. And lastly, my rating for this team, I don't think they did it overly good. They lost a couple decent depth guys, didn't really replace them with a whole bunch. Fabbri's a solid second, third line forward. Dumoulin's a solid second, third pair defensemen. So they added some really good guys via the trade market, but I don't think they really got a whole bunch better, and definitely didn't get that top 6 forward and top 4 defenseman they were wanting to get this offseason. So with that in mind, I'm going to give them a D+ rating. I don't think they did overly great. I think they didn't get a whole bunch worse, but they didn't get as much better as I think they wanted to. So in my opinion, I think D+ rating is warranted for the Ducks at this point in time. So that's my opinion on the Ducks and the Flames. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What do you think about the Ducks and the Flames? Do you agree with me that they had pretty bad seasons last year? Do you agree with me that they did all right when it comes to what they were planning on doing this year? Flames trying to get sort of younger and rebuild a little bit for the future. Ducks trying to push for that next step to try and get out of this rebuild. Do you agree with what I said about those two things? Plus, what do you think about their biggest questions? Their 3 ways these two teams can improve. And what do you think about my projected lineup and my predictions for both the Flames and the Ducks for this season? Definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's what I'm talking for today. Or to like this video, if you'd like to subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. We're now to all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below, and don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. So we can all discuss today's video. Also, the blog, talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. Leave a link in the description below, and I can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.